I'll be in Deuteronomy chapter 6. So it's been on my mind, I guess, for about a week. Sonia and I and the kids, or Genesis and Josiah, they're in the middle of their band competitions right now. So we've been doing a lot of that, and we're always around a lot of other families, and so we have a lot of interactions. Sometimes we talk about certain things, and about a week ago, I think it was Josiah had a football game, and after the football game, they performed the halftime show, and then they left because they needed to load their trailer and get ready for a show that they were doing the next day. And so we were standing there talking with a couple of the parents, and the director came up to us, and he had said, I guess he has one child, a daughter, and I guess she's really young. And the parents started asking about parenting, and they started talking about parenting. And Mr. Y, who is the director, he said, I don't understand why people would want to have a lot of children when they don't know what they're doing or how to raise children. Something along the lines of that. And Sonia and I both looked at each other like what? And he said, so, sometimes I just, when she's bad or she's misbehaving or throwing her tantrums, I just leave her be and I walk away and let it pass. And I thought to myself, oh boy, and so he's like, when he said, how do you know, or how do you know what to do? Well, we're given the instructions, and the Lord doesn't leave us hanging. Amen. The Lord has direction for every aspect of our life, and especially for raising children. And there's lots of scripture that talks about it, but I found this one here in Deuteronomy. I started in verse 4, chapter 6, verse 4. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." So the Lord's telling us here that, when we're at home or anywhere, that's where we need to talk to our children. That's where we need to teach our children. That's where we share things with our children about life. And, it's not a game. It's like, we don't just sit back and say, let's just see what they turn out to be. Because a lot of children today, they don't even know what sex they are. And that just mind baffles me with how it is today. And it's so mixed up, The truth isn't right anymore. And that's what they're being taught. Or there is no truth anymore. The truth can be what you want it to be. So you can't just sit back and let your kid sit there on the floor and throw a tantrum and then see how it turns out. Because it's not going to turn out good. And those are the instructions that the Lord gives us. And then when we grow up with that, we grow up making bad decisions. We grow up, with the world kind of like how it is today. There's so much confusion and so much chaos and so much, snatch and grabs, and there's no consequences for what you do, and it's almost like there's no wrong. He feels like, no, it's not about feelings. It's about truth, and it's about what the Lord directs us and what he says here, Sonia and I, we try. We've made mistakes with our kids, and we've made mistakes in our lives. I've made mistakes. I wasn't the greatest kid growing up, but there came a time where my parents taught me what was right and what was wrong. And I was the one who made the bad decisions. I was the one who did the things that were wrong, and that's part of teaching. But when I was doing it, I even knew that it was wrong, and that's not a good place to be, So I just wanted to share that with you, and I want to ask you to pray for us, because Sonia and I have our work cut out for us. When we're with those families, we need to find a way to share the truth. We need to find a way to tell them and to witness to them, so that their children can grow up. Our children are our future. Our children are the ones who are going to carry on the truth that we know. So, thanks.
Many people recall last week's message series that we started. I won't ask for a show of hands, but we were in the book of Acts last week. We talked about our good brother Paul and some of the preaching that he was doing, some of the suffering that he went through. We're going to continue that thought in the book of Acts chapter 17, which is where we're going to be today. We talked last week about Paul's witnessing opportunities, some of the persecution that he went through, meeting with the people at Berea. He kept Paul and Silas there. He wanted them to stay and minister to the new people that were there. I've discovered in my life and in service that it definitely takes a little bit more. The seasoned people in the Word have the advantage purely of time. Seasoned people in the Word, meaning people have been going to church for a while, it certainly doesn't mean that they know everything. That is certainly not the case. But they absolutely have maybe some longevity. But what I've noticed over the years is that newer people in the faith certainly require some guidance. And so Paul did that with these two men, Paul and Silas, and he left them there, Silas and Timothy left them there to minister to these new converts. Paul was wise in that. And so they sent him to a city known as Athens. How many have heard of the city of Athens? Athens, Greece, very famous city. Used to be one of the major capitals of the world from a legal standpoint. Was certainly the hub of all things Greece during the Grecian Empire. We're going to go through all of that. But let's start by reading in the book of Acts, chapter 17. Paul has been sent away in verse 15. In verse 14, it says, "Immediately the brethren sent Paul away to go to the sea, but both Silas and Timothy remained there. So those who conducted Paul brought him to Athens, and receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him with all speed, they departed." Now Paul is waiting in the city of Athens. It says he waited for them in Athens. His spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. Now what has Paul typically done? Paul has typically gone into the synagogue to talk to the Jewish leadership, the Jewish followers, to reason with them, as we saw earlier in chapter 17, to reason with them on the things of Christ. Remember, the Old Testament points to a Messiah. The Jewish contingent today is still looking for the Messiah. They do not believe Jesus was the Messiah. What Paul did, and as we're going to see in this passage of Scripture in Acts 17, is Paul continues with that. But Paul tweaks his message a little bit. So the title of today's message, again, if we have a title, would be Paul at Mars Hill. We're going to go through what that means, who that was. We're going to go through the other name, the Grecian name for it. We'll go through all of that. But bear with me as we sort of set the stage. Paul is walking around the city of Athens. If anyone has ever been to a new city, what do you typically do? You typically walk around. You certainly look around. You look at all the apple trees, for example, and where there's good cider and pie. You look to see where the beaches are or where the gift shops are, right? That's what you do. You're looking around. You're walking around, observing what kind of vibe does this city have? Has anyone done that? Right? You certainly do it at Yellowstone, stay away from the bison, but for the most part, you do it at places you're unfamiliar with. And that's what Paul was doing. Perhaps this was his first time in Athens. Perhaps he's walking around looking and seeing what was there. But what's interesting is Paul was guided by the Lord in everything that he did. He put the Lord first. So as he's walking around this town, remember it says that he's waiting and asking Silas and Timothy to come speedily to him. So he's walking around the city. And what does he notice? Something interesting. Now, as we go through this, what I want us to do is to parlay this passage with today. So be thinking of current situations, be thinking of our lives today, what we have to deal with in battle today. An idol or something that distracts us away from God doesn't necessarily have to be a wood and gold image that people bow down to. An idol can simply be that thing, philosophy, doctrine that takes us away from the things of God. Anything that replaces God in worship is an idol. And so you don't have to bow down to it. You don't have to, like those Buddha. Buddha has like a statue that people bow down to and all that. We're going to go to 1 Samuel 5. We'll do that probably second part. But he notices there's actual physical idols that are there all around the city. In fact, the Bible again uses that the city was given over to idols, which is an interesting term. It sort of means that it was consumed by. It was overtaken by. It says that he sees it, and it seems like the city was consumed by these idols. There were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of these idols everywhere. And so what does he do? Paul, predictable, but predictably godly in his motivation in what he did as he went from area to area. So in verse 17, he says, therefore, where does he go? He reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the Gentile worshipers and in the marketplace. So now that's new. He did this before, but in this passage, we've seen him mostly go to the synagogue. But here he's going to the marketplace, probably for a little bigger audience. Goes to the marketplace daily with those who happen to be there. So let's go back to this term, city was given over to idols. This is an interesting term. So that I actually looked it up, and it's the Greek word is katadoulos, which literally means under idols, or there's the idea of swamped by idols. So when you picture something that is sort of overtaken, the way that I pictured this as I studied this out was standing near the ocean or in the ocean, you see surfers, and a wave comes and it just sort of overtakes them, right? Like it covers them. That's sort of how I picture this. That's the idea, is that it was swamped over or overtaken by these idols, meaning that these idols were everywhere. And what's interesting is this philosophy was what's known as a polytheistic religion. Polytheistic simply meaning many gods. These societies had a god for everything. There was a god of the tree, a god of the wind, right? A god of the ground. They assigned a god in control of everything. They were not monotheistic, which is one God. That was Israel. Israel believed in just one God who was the creator over all. And so when you're talking to these people, it's hard to get on their level. Because when you say God, you know what you mean. But talking to someone who believes in, well, there's 10,000 gods or 50,000 gods, it's hard for them to relate. It's like you're speaking a different language. So Paul, in his brilliance in witnessing, lays the blueprint for what we need to do each time we witness. Now, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Athens, let's back up. Athens was a challenging location. These were as we're going to find out, these were cultured, educated people, right? You could say these were sort of the uppity ups, right? These were the people who had education, and they let you know it, right? They were educated, they were sophisticated, they were cultured. They were certainly proud of their history of their city, which had existed for nearly 1,000 years. I sort of picture it like, well, anything with a British accent automatically seems kind of uppity, snooty, right? So I, as I was thinking about that, I know no one here is British, thankfully, but I kind of picture it like a learning center, like an Oxford or a Cambridge, right? It's like the people, like the professors are walking around, and I know they don't, but I mean, they walk around like this, and they sort of have we're the cultural and educational leaders of our society, and no one can touch us, and that sort of thing, sort of pretentious. So as a political power, the city at this time was past its political prime. It's where decisions were made, and really the hub of the Grecian Empire was here. But it is still the intellectual capital of Greece. So it's also the religious capital of Greece. So anything philosophical or religious was sort of taken care of in the city of Athens. And so you just kind of picture this uppity, we know more than you type of vibe, right? Now, Oak Glen did not have that vibe, all right? Other town, I haven't come across a town that has that vibe here, right? We haven't come across an uppity town yet. Maybe it's coming. Maybe it's Malibu. I don't know, but whatever. It has that sort of vibe. But what Paul notices, more so than the vibe, because he can put that to shame, he notices all the gods. And so as he is in the marketplace and as he's in the synagogue, two specific groups come up to him. Verse 18. Then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him. Some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection." What's our message today? Our message is Jesus and the resurrection. Not only his, but for the faithful, theirs. And so Paul is predictable and spot on in what it is he's preaching. And he's preaching it to the upper crust of society, certainly of Grecian society. And so these people, so let's take a look. Epicureans, they were followers of a philosophy and teachings by someone named Epicurus, which was in the 2nd century, about 307 BC. The focus was a pursuit of the importance of pleasure. If you liked it, do it. Oh, borderline, I think it evolved into sort of a gluttony at some point. But the original was, if you're a big fan of going to the opera, then do it. Just do. This is how I picture sort of a beach community. Whatever, man. Like it was that sort of. That was kind of the vibe that I got from it, from some of these words. If you do it, man. It's cool. Whatever. That's kind of the vibe. So this idea morphed over time to Paul's day. Kind of devote yourself to whatever feels good. There was a campaign for an adult beverage, watching a lot of sports as I did, even as a kid. There was a campaign that was buy our adult beverage and grab all the gusto that you can. Get all the pleasure, enjoy life's pleasures, right? How many times do we hear that? Hey, you only live once, which I agree with. But get all the pleasure. Just put everything else aside and go after the pleasures of life. Well, that's how these were. They wanted pleasure as their main pursuit. Do whatever feels good. That was your main purpose in life, was whatever you could do. That was just awesome. Again, all I'm picturing are surfer guys. And there were no Grecian surfer guys back then. the robes would have been sopping wet. And so they valued really their purpose in life was pleasure. They valued a pleasure-filled, peaceful, sort of free of pain. We don't want to do any arduous pursuits. But attached to that was we don't have any responsibility to some sort of divine being or beings. We don't want to feel tied down. We don't believe that some sort of mystical spiritual being should be in control of our pursuit of pleasure, of things that we like to do. Remember what I said at the top. Picture our society today. Zion and I went to a store the other day, and there is so much makeup under lock and key. I mean, and then one aisle over, it was baby formula. Well, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So, for example, if baby formula is simply being taken off the shelves, placed into your pocket, and walked out with, what's the reaction? We're going to lock it down. If people are taking makeup and putting it in their pockets or in their carts and simply walking out, the reaction is to what? Lock it down. And so, unfortunately, today, people are in the pursuit of whatever they want. We're going to do whatever we want. And no one's going to tell us otherwise. We're not going to live by a standard. We're not going to live by morality. We're not going to live by rules. We need to tear it down and start over. We need to reimagine rules. I pray that the house never gets broken into. But if it does, the last person I want to call is a social worker. I need someone to come get this person out of my house because I have precious, valuable things in there. 2 of which are sitting here. The other 2 bark a lot, but more importantly, these 2. We don't need to reimagine anything. We need to come back to God. We need to come back to rules. We need to come back to law. We need to come back to order. So this concept of whatever you want, man, is a very old one. Here's Paul dealing with it. These Epicureans, that's what they believed. They also, one interesting part that I learned about them as well is they wanted to be free of superstitious fears. We're going to see that word superstitious again. But they had no fear of death. They were just sort of whatever happens, we don't care sort of mentality. They didn't deny that gods existed. They just didn't believe they had any interaction with man. So they weren't atheists necessarily. They just didn't think that they interacted. Again, what does that do? That absolves them of a plan. That absolves them of morality and law and rules. Again, think of our society today. If I can deny the existence of God, then I don't have to follow him. I don't have to read about him. And then in the end, I don't have to be accountable to him. So who are the Stoics? Well, the Stoics were just about the complete opposite. You've heard the term, whoa, he's looking awful stoic. That's where this comes from. These were pantheists, which means, again, be thinking of our current society. Pantheists believe that the universe is in control. Well, let me tell you a term that I hate. I haven't heard it here. I'm just going to let you know. This is a term that I hate. Well, I'm going to give it to the universe and let the universe decide what happens. I can't stand that. Pet peeve, I know. Pet peeve. The universe has nothing to do with it. The universe is simply a creation of the God of heaven. Right? That's all it is. The universe is not its own mystical entity that we give things to. But that's who these people were. Belief that the universe is God's, and they accept all gods into worship because they view gods in everything and everyone. Gods are everywhere. They believed that all things were from God, good or evil, so that nothing should be resisted. Right? Everything is a plan of God. Everywhere we look is of the gods. But there was no particular direction or destiny for man. Where does that sound familiar? If we give it to the universe, then I'm not accountable for what I do because the universe decided. I don't have to decide. I don't have to come up with a plan or look to a plan that a God of heaven could have laid out. There's no particular direction, no particular destiny. They were pretty proud. They were dignified. They were like, we are in tune with the universe. It just proves that what is old is new again, or there's nothing new under the sun. This is the same garbage that we have to face today. It's just not in idle form sitting there that people are bowing down to. So we deal with Epicureans and Stoics today. They give everything to the universe or whatever, man, just go chase it. It's the same concept today. Ultimately, it's the same devil influencing the same humankind made in the likeness and image of God under sin nature. So 2,000 years later, it's not going to be too different because it's the same devil chasing them. So what do? I love this. What does this babbler want to say? This term babbler is an interesting one too. Called Paul a babbler, which in the Greek is metsuka, which has the idea of narrowness, this hilltop, narrow sort of at the top. But another way to say it could be, what does this narrow-minded troublemaker have to say? Right? You could sort of reword it. What does this narrow-minded troublemaker have to say? But what is this guy saying? Because what does he do? Some people say he seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods. It was something new, right? He's in a very different place. Yet his message was the exact same. What's he preaching? He's preaching Jesus and the resurrection. So important. When we witness to people, what are we witnessing about? What's funny is he's preaching this, but when he gives a message here in the second half of this chapter, he is not going to mention Jesus until the end because he's reading his audience. And this is where our witnessing comes in. If you meet someone and you're not sure if their religious background, or you know that they're an atheist, if you're showing them end of the week and covenant theology and sort of the deeper things of the Bible, it's going in one ear and out the other. We're going to see here in Paul's message that Paul was a master of meeting people where they are. Assess the audience. Find out what it is that they know. Who are these people? So we're going to see that. In verse 19, and they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak. Now, having a feel for the way that Athens was, it was a place for people to sort of philosophize, right? They were going back and forth. Let's exchange ideas. Let's come up with whatever the new thing is. There's more. For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore, we want to know what these things mean. For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. So now we have their background. Why are they there? They love to talk about the news. They spent their time in news. They spent their time in new doctrine. They talked about philosophies. It was sort of the novelty of Paul's message that got him taken to this Areopagus. Now, these Greeks loved a good constant and always changing stream of news. What does that sound like? Oh, It snowed in Missoula. Look at that. This was early Twitter. They loved having new things coming at them in a stream of knowledge, wanting to chase these things. It's like they were hungry sheep looking up. What's the newest thing, but never being fed? They were just sort of constantly in search of something, new news. Give me something new in my feed. Give me something that's different from what I already know. Put something in my stream of knowledge collection. It's interesting how, again, things don't change. This is Twitter. This is social media. And before that, it was the news. When people used to watch television and watch the news, that's what it was. And prior to that, it was the radio and listening to news. How can someone like Orson Welles trick the entire country in the old days with radio? Because people were listening to it. They were fascinated by it. And they really thought aliens were coming down in War of the Worlds, right? They're hearing it and they're freaked out. And people are crashing cars and running out of their houses because it was on the radio. So it had to be true. And it has to be, if it's on television, it has to be true. And I only follow certain people on social media. So anything they say has to be true. But yet, there's always a one-upness to this idea. And that's why they were curious about what Paul was saying. You seem to be talking about foreign gods. You're bringing strange or unusual things to our ears. What are these things? And so the Bible makes it clear that they spent their time in nothing else but either to tell, I've got this new knowledge. I have a hot take. I have something new that I can share. Or, Brother Frank, you're brilliant. Tell me more. It's this constant stream. If I put a Ukraine flag on my social media profile, then I'm cool like everyone else. Or if I put this on social media, it means I'm cool. It's that concept. And so the devil is really good at distracting and misleading people, pursuing the things that are unimportant, but are made to feel important because the crowds say they're important. Ultimately, people are looking for something to follow. And that's where our witnessing comes in. Let's have them discover Christ and his resurrection and the resurrection. And that's what Paul was teaching. You want something new? I'll tell you the ultimate. And in verse 22, that's what he's going to do. But let's back up. The Areopagus still exists today. It is a prominent rock cliff in the city of Athens. Has anyone been to Athens? No. Not Athens, Georgia. Has anyone been to Athens, Greece? No. Okay. There is a prominent rock, sort of a big cliff that's northwest of the Acropolis. Has anyone ever heard of the Acropolis, which is in Athens, Greece? There was a Euro place in Missoula that was named the Acropolis. Very good. They put vinegar on their fries, which is very tasty instead of lemon. So we liked the Acropolis. And so it was if you translate the name Areopagus, it actually means Hill of Ares, A-R-E-S, Hill of Ares. It started off as a court that was sort of tried for homicides, religious matters. That's where it started when it was more of its prominence. It later became a place where sort of religious and philosophical matters were discussed. Okay. The equivalent to Ares, which was the Greek god of war, the reason why it was renamed was in Roman mythology, the equivalent to Ares is the Roman god Mars, which is also the god of war. Has anyone ever heard of Mars? Anyone? Mars? Okay. So the god of war under Roman rule, they named it Mars Hill. So the Areopagus was the god of war for the Greeks, renamed Mars Hill, kept the same name, same vibe, but with the Roman god Mars. This was known as Mars Hill. So the group that met there was sort of similar to the Jewish Sanhedrin. These were the respected local men who were charged with, investigating spiritual and philosophical ideas, right? It was the group that was there during this time that Paul encounters. And this group really kind of primarily defended the idea of the gods, the Greek idea of the gods. At the bottom line, we have to defend that concept. And so no matter what new thing comes in, we're talking about the Greek gods, that we're going to relate everything to the gods. Okay. Interesting place. No desire to visit Greece. Anyone want to go to Greece? No? Okay. People want to go to Greece. That's great. There's so much to discover around here. We didn't know they grew apples here. So there's so much to discover here that Greece is like way down the list. But if you ever go, take some pictures, let us know. That'd be great. So verse 22. Knowing this mindset, what does Paul do? What does Paul always do? Paul's going to stand up. When given the opportunity, and I say this from experience, when given the opportunity, we should take it to witness. Brother Frank talked about that this morning. When given the opportunity, we should take it. It's important. Why? Because it's what the Lord told us to do. He told us to share the word. He ended his ministry by telling his apostles, share the word. And so it's important. Paul didn't seem too shy. Often we'll say, thankfully, we've passed on Zion's, or we've passed on our ability to pretty much talk to anybody to Zion. She'll talk to anybody. That's great. Have we always used that for witnessing? No. But we got to talk to people to find out. And so that's what Paul is doing. Paul's given the opportunity to talk in front of them. They're saying, what is this babbler talking about? What do you have to say? What is this new thing? Let's take you to where the philosophers are. Let's take you over there. So what does Paul do? Paul suddenly is shy. No, what does he do? He stood, verse 22, in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. The other translations say too superstitious. I actually like that better than very religious. Very religious has, I don't know, it just has a different feel to it. So he starts off by preaching and telling them what he observed. Remember, he was walking around the city, and what does he notice? These idols. Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of them. And he says, okay, so I perceive that you are superstitious. And so he begins by preaching to his audience. And he's meeting them where they are. He's not going into some expose on Scripture. They didn't know anything about the God of Israel. We're going to see that in a second. They didn't know anything about him. So why would he dive into a conversation like he would with some of the churches? Right? His message to Jewish leadership is very different. You're looking for a Messiah. One has come. You're responsible for his death. Now repent and be aligned with Christ as the Messiah. He's not doing any of that. Why? Because he's sizing them up. He knows who they are. He knows what they're about. And so this term, superstitious, is an interesting one as well. In the New King James, it says very religious. King James and I think other versions call it superstitious. Really, the Greek root of this is a fear or dread of things of the devil. That's really what this term is sort of rooted in. And so, and more so than what others are. So have you ever met someone who was, as we know the term today, superstitious? Right? They don't step on cracks. Right? They always shoot 100 free throws prior to every game, or they have to count, or like, right? I mean, we've all met these people. Now there's probably something diagnosable for it, but at the time it was just like, he's a little nutty, right? He's superstitious. You know, I can't say this word at this time of day, or every time I look up I see the same thing, or whatever, right? And that's fine. But the term here is sort of aligned with that. It's a fear or dread of things of the devil, and more so than the average person. Okay, so too superstitious. Whereas the New King James says very religious. That's the term that Paul uses here. For as I was passing through, verse 23, and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription. And it's all in caps. We see it right there. What does it say? To the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, he's who I'm going to talk to you about. Our planet today and our society today does not know the God of the Bible. They just don't know him. And like these two groups, they just don't care. They're living their life and going on doing whatever it is they want to do. Grabbing all the gusto, living la vida loca, right? This is their life. They're doing what they want to do. No one's going to tell me what to do. I'm not just talking teenagers, right? I'm talking like adults. For example, I'm just going to take this. I don't need to pay for it because it's not a crime till it's $1,000. So I'm going to calculate it and get $997 worth of stuff and walk out. For example. Or, this person doesn't need to drive by me. Let me and 30 of my friends surround him and start beating his windshield with a baseball bat. Why? Because there's no rules. Everything has to be reimagined. The God of the Bible does not have to be reimagined. The God of the Bible needs to be followed, obeyed, adhered to, listened to, respected. That's the God of the Bible. And so that's who he's going to talk to them about. He launches into who God is. The unknown God, unfortunately, what they did is they believed that there were many gods. And so the unknown God was actually throughout the city. I thought this was an interesting thing. There was a 6th century philosopher who had a brilliant idea, right? Because they came up with a brilliant idea back then. They said, when there's a terrible plague in the city, let's release a bunch of sheep into the city. And wherever they stop and sit, that's who we'll offer a sacrifice to. Well, at that time, the sheep would just take off because they probably heard the word sacrifice and they're like, we're out of here. So they just blitz through the city. And so they're like, oh, they didn't stop at anyone. Uh-oh. So anytime they ran through the city, they would sacrifice to the unknown God because there wasn't a clear picture that this was the case. They didn't lay down anywhere. They didn't sit anywhere. So they thought, okay, well, sacrifice to the unknown God. So Paul tells the Athenians who exactly this God is. And what does he do? He does it in a way that is perfect for us. Remember, these are Witnessing 101 classes that we're reading about. He is meeting them where they are. So his first sentence is, God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Well, why would he say that? Because they thought that there were multiple gods who needed to be fashioned by hands and placed in a temple or a prominent place of worship. So he's reeling all that in and saying there is one God. And this universe that you worship or put things out to, this planet that you worship, the God of the trees, the God of the wind, which is strong in the Rialto area, these different gods had to be worshipped. Well, how about one God who was over all of it? What? See, I believe the world doesn't want to be accountable to a God or a higher being, because then they have to be accountable to a higher being. Then they have to find out that there's a higher being who exists who has a plan. That plan requires sacrifice, self-discipline, service, obedience, resistance, overcoming. When you put that on a laundry list of things we need to do in order to achieve righteousness with God, most people take it and chuck it. They don't want to be accountable. We see it in society. It certainly isn't going to be the case with God. How would you be accountable to God? Paul is saying just the opposite. He's telling the Athenians that this is God. It's the God who made everything. And he is distinct from his creation. So there's a God above creation. He made the world and everything in it. He's the Lord of heaven. He's the Lord of earth. He doesn't dwell in temples made with hands. He's not some idol fashioned and formed with hands. No matter how pretty they are, they've unearthed them. These are very detailed. These are some artists. This is before AI. This is before 3D printers. So they took a lot of time to fashion these things. And they were intricate. And they were detailed. And there were different ones for each element. So, what does God think of these gods? Let's go to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. Take a break from Acts. And we'll go to 1 Samuel chapter 5. The Philistines have defeated Israel in a battle, and they have taken the Ark of the Covenant. That's where we're at. 1 Samuel chapter 5. The Philistines took the Ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. When the Philistines took the Ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. Who was Dagon? Dagon was a false god. Dagon was one of the Philistines' main gods. So they put the ark next to this idol of Dagon. By the way, as we read this, just remember, God is in control. God rules everything, and that's what Paul is trying to get across. In verse 3, when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon. What was Dagon doing? He was falling on its face to the earth. I love how the Bible uses a neutral term here. Not his or her, its. Why? Because it's not a his or her. Does anyone else call Siri her? Yes, I do it too. Siri is not a her, Siri is a thing. That's what Dagon is. Dagon's a thing. Fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So what do? Fallen on its face, by the way. Picture that, right? Dagon had its arms up like this. So here's this idol, its arms up. Picture face down. I will not replicate this, okay, for fear of injury. Right, Brother Frank? That's bad. But picture, at some point, the Lord knocking it over. It is now face down in front of the ark. Oh, Dagon fell over. Let's go pick it up and set it in its place again. What happens? They arose the next morning. There was Dagon. Uh-oh. Coincidence? I think not. Where was Dagon? Fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. Ooh, extra feature here. The head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. This is what God thinks of these gods. God doesn't think much of these gods. And God's willing to overnight go like this to them and make them realize, Philistines, make them realize who's in control. Who's in charge? Your idol is bowing down before the ark of the Lord. In verse 5, therefore neither the priests of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and Dagon, our God. So what do? Ship it out to get it out of here. The same God who freed Israel from Egypt is the same God who's doing this. And it's the same God who's going to win in the end. We're going to talk about that in the second half. So back to Acts as we wrap up. Back to Acts. Acts 17. Are you catching a theme with this witnessing? I hope so. It's important. It's important. It's the command of the Lord's ecclesia. It's the command that we're to do in these last days. Without the witness of others, we don't have the truth today. So how important is passing the truth on? Deuteronomy 6. How important is it to pass it on, the next generation? How important is it for there to be a few? How many do you have, Lord? I have a few who have not bowed the knee to Baal. The Lord can work with a few, but the message still has to go out. So Paul says, he says anything in verse 25, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. Now this was a new concept, but he wanted to meet them where they were. You don't believe in this? Let me supersede what it is that you believe. And let me show you what the God of Israel is, who he is. And let me show you his plan. In the second half, we're going to talk about the awesome part of he's already off to a good start, but the awesome part of this message is when he's going to bring it all together for him. So we're going to see what he has to say, and then we're going to relate that with a couple other scriptures. So the witnessing of Paul is our blueprint. It's our witnessing 101 class. Do we have to stand we haven't been in downtown Rialto yet, but can we stand in downtown Rialto and just start proclaiming the word? Could we? Sure. We could. Get big signs, pretend like it's a color guard, right? And we're moving flags all over, like drawing attention. And that's all fine. But what is our witness like when we have that one-on-one situation? What is our witness like with the family member who maybe is struggling or is out of church, or the friend or the co-worker? What's our witness like with them? And brethren, may I even add, even more important is, what is our silent witness when we're not talking? What does that look like? What's the silent witness as people observe us? Oh, you're a follower of Christ. Well, that's interesting that you made those choices. That's interesting that you're using that language or deciding to have that or do this or go there. Paul lived the life of Christ even when nobody was watching. And that's who we need to be. We're witnessing when we don't know we're witnessing. I promise you that. The world is watching us to see what we do. And the devil has eyes on us to trip us up. And so that's what we have to remember. These things are vital. So what is Paul going to say to these people who had no concept of who God the Creator was? We're going to look at that in the second half. So let's stand this morning and be dismissed. Have a song of invitation. The Lord is working on your heart, brother, and there is an altar here to come and pray before the Lord. The Lord will meet you where you're at. But there is a plan to follow. We can't wing it with God. God is not accepting any service, just whatever we want to do. There is a plan. And there is an order to things. And that's what we have to remember. And I'm thankful for those who have taken that step to follow the order through scriptural baptism. First do first faith, the importance of that. And understanding that that first faith experience is vital to the beginning of our journey. But then after that, brethren, the next step of obedience is scriptural baptism into the Lord's New Testament church where the authority is, where the ark is, where the Spirit of God is. We'll see a couple verses in the second half that all other gods are going to bow before the God of Israel. And I want to be on his side. And that starts now and only in this life. We don't get a second shot at this. So let's choose that now in this life and share that with others. There's pews. Let's go tell them. Let's go tell them about the things of God. That's what Paul was doing. Let's do it boldly or let's do it quietly. Let's do it one-on-one. Our mouth should be always talking about God. And I pray that that's the case. So you pray for me, I pray for you as we sing a song of invitation this morning. What are we going to sing?
207.